Hey, what's up, everybody? Chris Trapasso here for the Week 10 edition of my show, All 32, the YouTube show in which I go deep on all 32 teams and give you a 1 to 3 minute snippet, observation, a lot of advanced stats. So after this show is done, if you're watching live, look in the link description and you will get a clickable timestamp. I'll do it right after this. That will have all 32 teams listed. If you want to just watch your team segment, you'll be able to click on those timestamps to just watch that 2 to 4 minute, 1 to 3 minutes, somewhere in that range segment. All right, I'm starting today on the NFC side here on all 32. I did AFC to start last week, and then move my notes over here. Going to start, as always, with the NFC East and the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys made a big trade at the trade deadline. Actually, two of them. They brought in Logan Wilson for a late-round pick, the linebacker from the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think he's still a pretty good player. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that he was making big plays in the Super Bowl. Now, I get it. It was like 3 or 4 years ago, and in the NFL, that can be a long time. But he's still a young player. He's a 3-down coverage linebacker who's pretty good against the run. He's just solid across the board. And he was one of like 5 different Cincinnati Bengals players, I think almost all of them on the defensive side, who requested a trade either this offseason or during the season. He's a Dallas Cowboy, but the huge trade was sending a second and a future first for Quinnen Williams. And that is absolutely needed for the Dallas Cowboys because they are 32nd in run defense success rate allowed. And if you ever hear me on this show or see me on Twitter and you see success rate, what that is referencing is when a play gets 40% of the needed yardage on first down, 60% of the needed yardage on second down, or getting the first down on third down or fourth down. So the Dallas Cowboys were last in the NFL. They're entering week 11, last in the NFL in run defense success rate currently. So they need someone that can help play alongside Kenny Clark, and that can be Quinnen Williams on the inside. And actually, if you look at some of his metrics, the pass rush hasn't quite been there for Quinnen Williams. And I went back and watched a little bit of his film. Not the same player that he was even 2 or 3 years ago in terms of just elite level pass rusher, but the run defense has been excellent. He is still very explosive. There's still so much power in his upper half. And he can be an instant impact player as a run defender. And I get it. It's 2025. I'm the biggest advocate of you pass and stop the pass to win in today's NFL. But it would go a long way to helping out this Cowboys defense if Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark can team up and fortify the interior of the Dallas defensive line. So teams can't just do the easiest play in football and hand it off and get 5 or 6 yards per carry. So last in run defense success rate on those running plays, but Quinnen Williams should add a boost to that run defense that is desperately needed in Dallas. They can score a lot of points, but they also give up a ton of points on that Cowboys team. All right, next here on all 32 in the NFC East, Washington Commanders. And they are the epitome of how quickly things can change in the NFL. Everything was coming up Washington Commanders last season. Jaden Daniels runs away with Offensive Rookie of the Year. They win 2 road playoff games, and they're playing the Eagles in the NFC title game. They have so many young players. They re-signed Terry McLaurin. Their GM's in their second season. It's like, man, this, if you want to buy stock in the Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels deals with a bunch of injuries. Terry McLaurin we've seen for like 2 games this season. He re-aggravates his hamstring injury last week, and he's probably not going to play again this week. What I wanted to talk about them, they have 3 of their next 4 games on the road. So they're 3-7 right now, and it's not really easier sledding coming up for the Washington Commanders. And more specifically on a team building perspective, to not just point out that they have 3 of their next 4 on the road. The one problem, and maybe there's a little bit of hindsight here, but I feel like I mentioned this and a lot of other analysts mentioned this before the season. Washington went into the year with a huge, I don't want to say a huge need at edge rusher, but they were super fragile at the edge rusher position. I mean, Montez Sweat has been long gone. Chase Young, long gone. They're good on the inside. They lose Jonathan Allen, but Deron Payne is playing good football. But they were like one injury away on the edge for not being able to field like a competent, like average or even bottom of the league outside pass rush group. And unfortunately for the Commanders, like again, everything seemingly gone wrong. Austin Eckler lost early in the season due to an injury, but Dorrance Armstrong, who was becoming their best edge rusher and was not a high caliber player at edge, but was their most consistent edge rusher. He went down, I believe, in September. Yeah, it definitely was September. To a knee injury. And then it's like, we don't have anyone else who can rush the passer. We are relying on Jacob Martin, who's a career journeyman. He's still athletic. We've seen flashes, but we're relying on him and Von Miller, Frankie Louvu as a blitzer. So that was one area of this team that if you want to poke holes in the team building process, or maybe the I told you so, or we should have realized something about this Commanders team was not going to be able to rekindle the magic of 2024, that was it. You couldn't have predicted necessarily a Jaden Daniels injury or Terry McLaurin injury. They brought back Zach Ertz. I like Jalen Lane. He's made plays. Deebo Samuel was a fun trade. Laramie Tunsil's been in and out of the lineup, but mostly played very well. But they went in with a weak defensive front on the outside and not a lot of depth. So now they're relying on Von Miller in his mid-30s, who the last 2 years in Buffalo just was not anywhere close to the Von Miller that we even saw in LA with the Rams when he won that Super Bowl, and Jacob Martin. So that was a huge miss. And maybe their GM just couldn't bring in anyone. There was no one to draft. There was no one that would trade with them. But he makes the big swings of Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil. The edge rusher group and the defense has been actually very bad throughout the entire season, especially after that Dorrance Armstrong injury. There's been times where Marcus Mariota has actually looked pretty good, and Cliff Kingsbury's offense has been clicking with Jaden Daniels or without him. Early in the season, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the 7th-round rookie, has run the football well. It's just the defense cannot stop anyone, and I'm a big believer, and I'm sure Dan Quinn is as well. Everything starts up front with the defense. If you can get after the quarterback, if you can stop the run, it's going to have a ripple effect on the rest of your unit. Post Dorrance Armstrong, post that injury, the Commanders have been really bad at the edge rusher spot, and they just don't have the horses to routinely get after the opposing quarterback. All right, Philadelphia Eagles. So they fall into this rut like they seemingly do every year in October, and people are calling for Nick Sirianni's job, and should Jalen Hurts get benched, and A.J. Brown's going to get traded. They're on a 3-game win streak now. And overall this season, the Eagles are still 3rd in EPA per play allowed on D. And that's obviously in non-garbage time situations. So, like, all of the hysteria and all of the concern about the Eagles and what's going to happen with this team, are they falling apart, are they crumbling? Even with that 2-game losing streak in like the kind of the first third of their season, they're still 3rd in EPA per play allowed on defense. And that's not just to say that they've rebounded well from that little rut that they were in, that 2-game losing streak, but I talked about it a lot. I posted a lot of TikTok videos on this front. The Eagles lost Milton Williams, who's been great in New England, Josh Sweat, who was such a consistent and versatile piece up front the last 4 years. He's in Arizona. He's having a great season with the Cardinals. They lost Darius Slay. They lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They haven't had James Bradbury for a couple of years. Who else? There's a few others that they've lost from that defensive line. They haven't had Hassan Reddick for a couple seasons. And they're still 3rd in EPA per play allowed on defense. Jahad Campbell next to Zach Bond. That has been one of the best defense or linebacker tandems on defense in the NFL. So that first-round pick was awesome by Howie Roseman. He finally picked the linebacker in the first round, which he seemingly never wanted to do ever. He does it late in round 1 and gets, I think, to me right now, unless I'm totally blanking on someone, I think Jahad Campbell should be the defensive rookie of the year. I wasn't actually meaning or planning to say that, but just in watching the film that I've watched and looking at his analytic profile, he's been outstanding. Josh Uche's played well, has rushed the passer better than I think anyone expected. Jalix Hunt, the former Cornell safety turned Houston Christian or Houston Baptist. I always forget which one that is. I think Houston Baptist. Outside linebacker has been really good. They've lost Zadarius Smith to retirement. They've lost Obo Okoronkwo. And I'm kind of running through the defensive personnel in Philly. They trade for Jalen Phillips. I mean, Howie Roseman keeps his foot on the gas always. And he has 8 pressures in his Philadelphia Eagles debut. Jalen Phillips is going to be a key piece in the NFC playoffs. There are going to be either he gets shut down and the Eagles can't stop the opposition on defense, or he is just going to wreak havoc alongside Nolan's or opposite Nolan Smith and on the same defensive front with Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and it's going to be a key piece to probably another deep playoff run in Philadelphia. So hats off to trade that 3rd-round pick to Howie Roseman to get a reasonably young Jalen Phillips who has dealt with injuries. But when he's been healthy, and he was healthier this year in Miami, he's been really, really good. And I was saying, I was on this show and on my TikTok, the Eagles have a pass rush problem. They need more pass rush help. They lost Zadarius Smith. They lost Obo Okoronkwo. They lost Nolan Smith to IR. They need someone to give this pass rush a jolt, and they got it with Jalen Phillips. I don't think he's going to have 8 pressures every single week, of course, but it was a very productive, stellar debut for Jalen Phillips in Week 10. The last team here on all 32 in the NFC East, the New York Giants. They fire Brian Daboll after the 2-7 start. I understand it. I don't know if it was the right decision, but it comes to a point when you're an owner, I'm assuming, where the win-loss record has to mean something. And after 2022, Brian Daboll's first season, where they have that magical run, they kind of win a bunch of games in fluky manners. They're not winning because of Daniel Jones. They win, I think, before last year's Chiefs team that went 11-0 in one-score games. The Giants were something crazy, 10-1 or something in one-score games that year. After that, they just have not won a lot of football games. But for as much as I understand it, and I saw Dan Orlovsky's take this week from ESPN that he thinks that the Giants made the wrong decision because, and I agree with him, because Jackson Dart is starting to play really good football under Brian Daboll. Now, there has been, because he left last week's game with a concussion, and that's going to force Jameis Winston to start in Week 11 for the Giants, there's been some conversation of, well, he's running too much, he's taking too many hits, it's not sustainable. Okay, I mean, that's somewhat reasonable, but there are so many quarterbacks who run a lot in today's NFL, and you just got to learn to slide and not take as many big hits. But in terms of throwing the football from in the pocket, creating off structure, and finding that good balance, he wasn't constantly running when his first read wasn't there. And a lot of the times he was making quality throws on the run. There was 3 or 4 in that last game in Chicago, in the snow, in the cold, where this kid from Ole Miss was making quality throws in those bad temperature, or in that bad weather, under pressure, when he had to roll left or roll right, or on a bootleg, or after he thought he was going to scramble, he would keep his eyes up and find Theo Johnson down the field, or find Darius Slayton over the middle. So I've been saying it for a couple weeks here that watching the film for Jackson Dart, I was really impressed. They lost a couple close games, and maybe that was ultimately what sealed the fate for Brian Daboll. But their quarterback, their young rookie quarterback, he is what you are clinging to right now as a New York Giants fan, because he's actually played really good football. And what's good for him, fortunately, that Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, steps into the interim head coaching job there in New York. So there's no change of scheme, or now you have a defensive guy calling the play or whatever. You don't have a defensive guy at the helm. You still have your offensive coordinator, who's now the head coach. So we'll see if Mike Kafka can prove to be a valuable commodity as a head coach down the stretch here. But keep an eye on Jackson Dart, because I think he's actually playing really good football, especially considering he lost his, I think, will ultimately be an elite level wide receiver early in the season in Malik Neighbors. All right, jumping now to the NFC North. J.J. McCarthy. He's got to be the conversation, because he comes back, they win their first game, then they lose in Week 10, And a lot of the conversation is like, oh, maybe he's not the one. With JJ McCarthy, just because it's more than halfway through his second season, let's not think that he's played a season and a half. He's barely played. He's played like 6 games. So any talk of oh, they got to move on, he wasn't the one. He's like 6 or 7 games into his NFL career at this point. And he's made some big time throws. I mean, last week in that loss, 4 big time throws, 3 turnover worthy plays. He just needs to dial it back a little bit. And I've said that about Caleb Williams early in the career, for Josh Allen early in the career, even though he won the MVP. Patrick Mahomes did, maybe tried to do a little bit too much. A lot of these high-level quarterbacks who become these elite-level players have to dial it back a little bit early in their careers. And that's what I would rather a quarterback be. Someone that the head coach or the offensive coordinator has to say, hey, dial it back a little bit. Take the check down. You don't want to have to push them to try those big-time throws, those tight window throws down the field. J.J. McCarthy is pulling those off. He's just making too many mistakes. What I do like is that he only took 1 sack in the loss in Week 10. And overall, in this kind of spotty, in and out of the lineup second season for him, but really first season playing, 8 big-time throws, 8 turnover-worthy plays. As you will hear later in this episode of All 32, there are a bunch of veteran quarterbacks that have more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws. So to be at 8-8 at his stage of his career is actually reasonably encouraging for J.J. McCarthy. Chicago Bears. I have a take that I think the Chicago Bears, unless things drastically turn around, they are aligning, or they are pointing toward making the playoffs this year. And it feels like I've heard things and seen things from Kyle Brandt, a lot of other the Bears fans in the media that are like, hey, these are games that the Bears normally lose. The blocked field goal against the Las Vegas Raiders, they win the next week with the same score, like 25-24. Then this past week, they're down big in the second half to the Giants at home. It feels like, oh, this is the game where the Bears come back to earth. They get closer to 500. And then they ultimately win that game, and Caleb Williams has a great fourth quarter, and they win that game by 7. That's why it's nothing tangible. It's nothing quantifiable, but it's just like the Bears normally do lose those games, and they've been winning them. They are 4-1 in one-score games this season. They were 3-7 in one-score games a year ago. And actually, one of their one-score victories was in Week 18. So they went into Week 18 2-7 in one-score games. And there was so much talk of, oh, hey, they were 3-2 or 4-2. The Hail Mary happens against the Commanders, and then they lost like 9 in a row. A lot of those losses were super tight games that they couldn't find a way to win. They're doing that this season. I've talked so much about Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson. I don't want to get super specific, but 4-1 in one-score games. For as much as I understand that teams normally regress back to the mean, and that you could be a fan of the Vikings, Packers, or Lions and say, oh, hey, 4-1, that's not going to last. I would say they're regressing back to the mean from 2-7 and 3-7 a year ago in one-score games. And because I think that's something that a relatively young team with a second-year quarterback needs to learn, how to win those tight games and not make the critical mistakes and make the big plays in the third and fourth quarter. Green Bay Packers. I don't really know what to do with the Packers. They are the team that is a little bit of an enigma now, because if you look at the advanced metrics, they're third in EPA per play on offense throughout the season. And you're like, okay, that's great. I'm seeing things on Twitter where Matt LaFleur is coaching for his job down the stretch, that if the Packers don't get the 1 seed, he's going to get fired. I know they've had a lot of playoff disappointment in Green Bay. I do. And I know that that's not just the standard for that organization, but seeing how good these regular seasons have been with the end of Aaron Rodgers and then now with Jordan Love, yeah, you want to see more than, winning one playoff game. But I think Matt LaFleur is one of the best play designers, play callers in the NFL. Apparently, he's gotten pretty run heavy this season. I haven't watched all of their film, but I've watched enough. Josh Jacobs still playing well. Jordan Love, the last 2 weeks, though, has been a shell of his former self. 6.1 yards per attempt the last 2 weeks in a very quarterback-friendly offense. Like, you can't have that dip for a long time if you're going to try to get a 1 seed in what has become a very competitive NFC and not have to go on the road to Philadelphia or go on the road to Los Angeles to face the Rams or the Seahawks. And what I posted or what I said in my voiceover on TikTok this week was the Packers lost Tucker Kraft in the third quarter in that strange loss to the Carolina Panthers at home. And we cannot, I cannot overstate how important his value was to this team. He was not winning routinely in like the traditional tight end type of way. He was not seam routes, post down the middle, dig routes, deep overs. A lot of it was just he was the check down guy, and he is just an absolute maniac after the catch. It felt obvious to me with the 3 sacks against a good Eagles defense that Jordan Love didn't feel comfortable with that check down, and the offense as a whole didn't have that high percentage throw at the end of a play, 3 or 4 seconds into a play, that could turn into a 20 or 40 or 50 yard game. So let's not forget about the loss of Tucker Kraft and having no Matthew Golden for the Green Bay Packers the last week, and then going into the fourth quarter of that that Carolina Panthers game. It matters. I mean, he, to me, and I, not that me saying it ultimately means that it's true, but I felt like Tucker Kraft had emerged as an elite level tight end this season, and now they don't have him for the rest of the year. So they need to get right on offense. I think the defense is completely fine. And no one would have thought that those 2 games would have gone as poorly as they did offensively. Carolina at home, Philly at home, to score 13 points and 7 points in both the losses. Suddenly the Packers are, I don't want to say they're reeling, but it felt like, the Packers are going to cruise to 14-2-1, whatever that would be. Yeah. And now it's like they are in a pretty heated battle in their own division in the NFC North. Last team here in the NFC North, Detroit Lions. I want to talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown, who, if you look at specific numbers, and I'm going to tell you here in a second, he has been the best bet in terms of pure efficiency for the high-volume receivers in the NFL for a long time now. The most stable, consistent, you can bet on me receiver. And I'll tell you why. Since 2022, which was Amon-Ra St. Brown's second season, and when he really broke out and we were like, okay, he's really, really good. Since the start of 2022, Amon-Ra St. Brown has the 4th most targets of any receiver in football. But among the top 10 in targets since 2022, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the only receiver in that top 10 to have a catch rate of at least 70%. All those other elite level, high volume receivers are somewhere in the 60 range in terms of catch rate. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is not at 70.2 and everyone else is at 68. He's at 75.8% catch rate. Now I get it. A lot of the other receivers are outside guys that have a higher ADOT, and that's true. But high volume, high catch rate, that is elite level. That is the best efficiency in the NFL. And it is, I think, to a larger point, that you can have your slot receiver be your number 1 wide receiver. I'm looking at the Bills when I'm thinking of that most namely. And I'll get to them obviously later on the AFC side. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is the number 1 target in Detroit for now going on 4 years, and they're not ashamed of it. 4th most targets since 2022, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And the only receiver in the top 10 of targets since 2022 to have a catch rate over 70%. And it's almost 76 for Amon-Ra St. Brown. So he has become the surest bet at the wide receiver position in the NFL, not just today, not just this season, but for the last 4 years. Amon-Ra St. Brown is an elite wide receiver and is worth all pro consideration every year. Okay, moving to the NFC South, Atlanta Falcons. Michael Penix has to be better. In watching that game in London last week, that was there for the Falcons for the taking. Like that was there for the taking for them. They could have had a huge win internationally over a previously 7-2 Colts team, and there was just way too many throws. And I watched the duration of that game, like the entirety of it. Way too many throws that Michael Penix had open receivers, mostly on the sideline, and the throw drags Darnell Mooney out of bounds, or it's at his feet. And it's like from a clean pocket, and he's supposed to be this lightning, this thunderous arm pocket passer that can rocket the football to all levels of the field. And he certainly can, but the accuracy has just not been there. And those big time throws have disappeared. Last season in that short audition late in the year, when Michael Penix as a rookie came in for Kirk Cousins, he had 10 big time throws to just 2 turnover worthy plays. And that's what sparked all the excitement. Like, oh man, year 2 of Michael Penix, he's the unquestioned starter. He's going to get all the first team reps in training camp and at the start of the season in practice. He's got Drake London. He's got Bijan in year 3. He's got Darnell Mooney coming back. He's got Kyle Pitts, a better offensive line. They've added so much to the defense, and the defense has been really good. This is the breakout year for Michael Penix. Right now, entering week 11, Michael Penix has 8 big-time throws and 11 turnover-worthy plays. I noticed, too, that in that game on NFL Network in Germany, I don't know if Kurt Warner said it, or was it Rich? No, it was Adam Amin with him. Yeah, Adam Amin, who's great. He's a former Valpo guy, too. I went to Valpo. I actually knew him in college. He was a great dude then, too. Anyway, enough about me, and back to Michael Penix. One of those commentators mentioned that there was a play where Penix scrambled and got 6 or 7 yards. And they said in talking to Penix this week, he told us that he at times just gets so locked in on being a passer, he kind of forgets that he can scramble. And then after that, Penix just turtled when he felt pressure 4 or 5 times down the stretch. And if you go back and look at Michael Penix, his Washington Pro Day results, they do not whatsoever match the type of athlete that he looks like he is on the field. I don't know if they were juiced. A lot of Pro Day numbers do get juiced a little bit with 40 and the 10-yard split. You obviously can't really lie about the vertical and the broad jump, but the 3-cone, you can kind of fudge it a little. He looks like he's the most athletic quarterback ever. And I just don't see it. And I don't see any desire or ability. Once in a while, he can run away if there's pressure. Being a lefty on his right side, he can be reasonably fast running away from a defensive end or a defensive tackle. But in terms of making a defender miss or creating off structure routinely, Michael Penix just doesn't have that. So the Falcons, I don't think their season is done because I think they've shown that they can play with some of the best teams in the NFL. But he needs to be considerably better. And I don't even want to say take that next step. He just needs to be as good as he was in that late season audition as a rookie. Speaking of quarterbacks who are disappointing, Carolina Panthers. Bryce Young was another one that in 2024, especially down the stretch, there was so much to be encouraged about. He got benched for Andy Dalton, came back and played really good football. And the Carolina Panthers, I think, were oh, absolutely. We feel good about this former number 1 overall pick. That's the guy that was selected by this organization. Improvisationally, pretty spectacular at times, could throw with anticipation, throwing pretty accurately down the stretch. And I don't know if in hindsight, I don't know if he was just hey, we're out of it. There's not as much pressure on me. But he not only has not taken that next step, but he's regressed. His passer rating right now is 79.7. And his yards per attempt, which is very fundamental, classic stat. If you're a quarterback in today's NFL, a full-time starter, you want to at least be at 7 yards per attempt. The elite guys are at 8 and sometimes close to 9 for a season. Bryce Young's yards per attempt average is 5.6 right now. That is bad backup level. There have been times where he's created off structure. He's, run right, spun around, found Rico Dowdle wide open against the Cowboys down the field for a touchdown. And Tyrell McMillan has been good. He's been a quality rookie number one wide receiver. He has been absolutely as advertised, and I think they're super happy with that pick. Xavier Legette, the year before, a late first-round wide receiver, not so good. They get Jalen Coker back. He's a quality player. He's big. He's athletic. And Rico Dowdle is like 5th in the NFL in rushing. He's in the top 5. And the defense has improved. It's not a top 10 group, but they like allowed the most points in yards in NFL history last season. And they're like middle of the pack now. And they've won some impressive games, but Bryce Young is the reason that this team is not continuing to make that step into playoff contention in the NFC. He needs to be better. So both of those two young quarterbacks need to be considerably better for their teams to have any chance to even be in the hunt or sniff a wild card spot in the NFC this season. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are another team, and there's a few others that I will get to that I think fall into this category. They are another team like the Green Bay Packers, and maybe to a more intense degree, that if you search any analysis about the Buccaneers the last month or so, it's, the offense doesn't look right. Baker's played well, but they can't run the ball, and they're just in a rut. Like, what's wrong with this offense? And starting to point fingers at the play caller, at maybe Baker hasn't really played up to the level or taken another step. Now, like being close to 30, or maybe he is 30 at this point. I'll tell you why. They're another team that is dealing with a litany of injuries. And I get it. I think the blanket statement of like, you can't use injuries as an excuse, that's viable because everyone's got injuries. But you need to be more granular about it. Look at the players that they have been missing, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, well, obviously they're not the same Buccaneers team that's been to the playoffs the last 2 years. And 2 seasons ago was extremely close to the NFC title game, losing a tight one in Detroit. Chris Godwin has not played yet this season. Bucky Irving's been out for over a month. Mike Evans been out for 3 games now, I think. 3 or 4 games. Concussion in the separated shoulder. They've had injuries on the offensive line. I don't think a ton on the defensive side, but the reason the offense is like in the middle of the pack or in like the bottom third of the league in like EPA per play this season is because of that. It's not because Baker has regressed or the play calling is terrible. They don't have their marquee players. They could get Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving back for this big game, 2 6-3 teams in Orchard Park against the Bills in week 11. That would help. Because Bucky Irving still leads the Buccaneers in missed tackles forced this season with 15. Rachaad White has been the stand-in for him ever since he's been out for like over a month now, and was obviously the clear backup to him to start the season. He has forced 13 missed tackles. So they have not run the ball well. They had Tristan Wirfs was out early in the season. They have some, I think, of their interior offensive line that's been banged up, but their weapons just haven't been there. Tez Johnson has been awesome. I featured him a few weeks ago here on All 32. The 7th round rookie from Oregon. He's just so fun and so elusive after the catch. He's been like their number one guy. Emeka Egbuka dealt with an injury too. I don't know if he's even 100%. He did catch a touchdown last week against the Patriots. But the reason that we haven't seen this team take the next step and go 13-4 or 14-3 after proving to be one of the better, more stable teams in the NFC the last 2 seasons since Baker Mayfield came over is because they've been so injured. New Orleans Saints, I have something positive to say about this team. Tyler Shuck actually looked good in that Week 10 win over the Carolina Panthers. And I've poked fun at, he's older and what were they doing? I wouldn't have picked him in the top 40, top 50, wherever he was selected. I think he was like the 41st or 2nd pick in the draft. But beyond that, he had 2 big-time throws, no turnover-worthy plays, and an adjusted completion rate of almost 80%, 77% in that game. Excuse me. I think I got another one. Nope. Okay. His average depth of target was, yeah, there it is. His average depth of target was over 10. So it wasn't like he was just checking it down, and that's why he had a high adjusted completion rate. 2 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays against what I had just said was a Panthers defense that has been pretty good this season at times. It's a middle-of-the-road defense. And for a rookie who, yes, played an extremely high amount of, or a large amount of football in college and is 25 years old, maybe he's even 26 by now, that was pretty impressive. So if you're a Saints fan and you're like, wow, like when are we going to be good? This roster is so bad. We traded Rashid Shaheed. We have Chris Olave, but not a lot else. A lot of our stars on the defensive side are aging. You can watch Tyler Shuck and be like, well, he might be the answer. I'm not positive. I don't feel super confident about that, but at least he's flashed. And I've always said that you want to see flashes from your quarterback in the rookie season. They don't have to flash all the times. And there can be bad moments where they look like rookies and they have a bad game. You just want to see some flashes. As an improviser, as a thrower too, you don't want them to just be strictly running around. But Tyler Shuck started to show some flashes in this 17-7 win over the Panthers last week. Okay, jumping down to over to the NFC West, San Francisco 49ers. Huge 4-game stretch coming up. Arizona, Carolina, Cleveland, and Tennessee. So they're 6-4. They just lost. They're starting to get a little healthier, and that is a team that's like, I mean, talk about injuries. Like it feels like it's every year. When they're healthy, they make it all the way to the NFC Championship game at least. When they're not healthy, they either miss the playoffs, but I think this season they could actually make the playoffs. And I said, I think 2 weeks ago, I started with a round of applause for Kyle Shanahan. Like this is his best coaching job that he's done, given what he's dealt with. Not even just on the offensive side, but no Nick Bosa, no Fred Warner for a long time now. They're 6-4, and they have Arizona, Carolina, Cleveland, and Tennessee over the next month. It would not be crazy whatsoever. And they're probably going to get Brock Purdy back this week. Probably Brandon Ayuk at some point here soon. Ricky Pearsall, potentially. They could be 10-4. And maybe I wouldn't say it would be fraudulent, but they would be maybe not coming off a 4-game winning streak against the best group in the NFL. But 10-4 is 10-4 at that point. You can only play and beat who's on your schedule. So buy stock now in the San Francisco 49ers. I saw that from Big Cat on Barstool in his weekly power rankings that he's like, look at the schedule, buy stock in the 49ers now. And that's why I wanted to highlight that. Los Angeles Rams. Matthew Stafford is potentially playing his best football of his career in his late 30s this season. He is, to me, one of the front runners for MVP, which would be so cool if Matthew Stafford won his first MVP and did it at like 37 or 38 years old. That'd be crazy. He has 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And you know me, I'm not someone that's only going to look at touchdowns and picks as a qualifier or an identifier of how good a quarterback is playing, because a lot of times there's dropped interceptions, there's easy throws that the quarterback, throws it into the flat and his receiver makes 10 guys miss, and that's a touchdown. But if you look at his big-time throws to turnover-worthy plays, 23 big-time throws, 8 turnover-worthy plays. That's it. So that 25-2 touchdown to interception ratio is really not that inflated from how well he's playing in isolation. And for as good as the defense is, they're like in the top 5 of like every analytic category when it comes to EPA per play, success rate, DVOA, all that. Matthew Stafford's play has been incredible this season. And it's a big reason why this is right now, going into the second half of the season, feels like the scariest team in the NFC. Seattle Seahawks, talk about scary offensively. Jackson Smith-Njigba is having an offensive player of the year type season. It's between him and Jonathan Taylor at this point. If this award has become the best non-quarterback award, because the MVP is probably always going to be and should be in almost every case a quarterback. if offensive player of the year has become that, like, who is the best offensive player that's not a quarterback? It is a two-man race. Jonathan Taylor, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. And I want to highlight, I always say on this show that I like to highlight advanced stats. And I need to like frame how good JSN has been in terms of just pure efficiency, which that's what every team and every player should be after in the NFL. Jackson Smith and Jigba's yards per route run average is 4.61. Obviously leads the NFL. Is that high? Is that a lot? Okay, let me tell you. The last 5 seasons, the number one player in yards per route run is usually somewhere in the high 2s or low to mid 3s. The best that we've seen in terms of yards per route run, in terms of the highest end of season figure in this all-encompassing wide receiver metric, was Tyreek Hill in 2023 with the Dolphins. His yards per route run average was 3.72. Jackson Smith and Jigba is almost a full yard higher than that. And normally, like, the difference between number 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 is like a couple, 3.72, 3.61, 3.42, 3.23 usually. And then there was a few, I think, was it Devontae Adams in 2020 was like in the high 2. It was like 2.7, 2.8. And that was like, whoa, if anyone got to 3, it was like, that's really high. Last year, Puka was the leader in yards per route run, was like 3.23, 3.26. JSN is 4.61. Now, we do have the second half of the season, and I'm assuming that defenses are going to start to say, we're going to try to let Torrey Horton and A.J. Barner and maybe Rashid Shaheed beat us and put a lot more defensive onus on stopping JSN. But they've seen so much zone. He's so savvy finding those gaps in zone. The timing between JSN and Sam Darnold has been spectacular. And he catches everything. He's got really reliable hands. And he's pretty sneaky good after the catch. He's not like Deebo Samuel. He's not A.J. Brown running over guys. But he's slippery enough to create after the catch. And I think he's sneaky fast too. But JSN, yards per route run, 4.61. When I saw that this week, I was blown away because that is definitely it has to be one of the highest yards per route run figures this late in the season in the PFF era. That it is just remarkably high. And the last team on the NFC side here on All 32, Week 10's edition, Arizona Cardinals. I don't know what they do at wide receiver. We're transitioning from the most efficient receiver in the NFL this year to an offense that is barren at wide receiver, especially without Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. Zay Jones tore his Achilles. Who are they going to throw to? Who is Jacoby Brissett going to throw to? Jalen Virgil, Deshaun Palmer, Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson. I mean, Trey McBride is I would say he's an elite level tight end. He's right on the cusp if he's not. They don't have James Conner. They still don't have Trey Benson at running back. It's Amari DiMercado and not much else. Marvin Harrison Jr. has not lived up to the hype. He hasn't been bad. He hasn't been a disappointment. He hasn't been someone that you're saying, hey, they're not going to extend him necessarily. But I don't know if he's earned this monster extension at this point, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to play this week. Got injured last week. And they have Jacoby Myers out there, and it feels like they don't want to throw Kyler Murray back out there on the field. And they have, I mentioned it earlier with what team was it? Oh, the Washington Commanders. They have 3 of their next 4 on the road. The Arizona Cardinals have 3 of their next 4 at home and 4 of their next 6 at home. So if they are to right the ship, at least they don't have to go on the road to try to turn this thing around. 3 of the next 4 at home for Arizona and 4 of the next 6. I just have no idea who Jacoby Brissett is going to throw the football to. Huge opportunity for Greg Dortch. Huge opportunity for Michael Wilson. But I think we will see that, Jacoby Brissett's kind of come back to earth. We know why he's not a starter now. He's just a bridge guy. He's a backup. Well, the receivers that he's going to throw to are just bottom of the league in terms of, or bottom of the roster-ish type players. I mean, Michael Wilson's a solid player. Greg Dortch, okay. But those are your number 1 and number 2 receiver options. And it's not necessarily their fault, but maybe they should have tried to add more depth to the receiver position this offseason, especially because Marvin Harrison Jr. did not have this Malik Neighbors type rookie year. And they didn't get a lot of other production from other wideouts in 2024. And now with those two, with the one guy that they brought in, Zay Jones, out for the year, and Marvin Harrison Jr. hurt again, there's just not a lot of options in Arizona. All right, before I jump over to the AFC side, I have to remind you to like and subscribe. That means a lot to me. It helps out the channel. And do not forget, if you are watching this after the live session, go down to the description and find your team's clickable timestamp to watch your team segment. 2 to 4 minutes. I've been saying 1 to 3, and then sometimes I say 2 to 4 because occasionally I get really to talking, and it can be like a 3 or 4 minute segment. But you will find your team segment there here on All 32. So you do not have to watch the entire show. I'm completely fine with that. Watch your team's segment, share it with your friends, share it with your friends that are fans of other teams, if that's your case in your friend group or your family group. I mean, most families kind of like the same teams. But do not feel like the need to watch this whole hour and 15-minute show. I know you don't have the time to do that necessarily, but click on the timestamp that has your team next to it, and you will get directed specifically to where I'm talking about your favorite team. All right, AFC side. High-performing video for me this week on TikTok started with the Bills need to make a change at wide receiver. And I highlighted Keon Coleman. And I do not want to continue to drag him through the mud as obviously as a person, but as a player, because I really think that beyond his limitations as an individual on the field, a lot of it has been what the Bills have asked of him. They've said, you are our X receiver. You are going to play on the outside more than any other wideout. You're going to be near the top of the team in targets. We're going to throw you a bunch of back shoulders every game, and you're going to be Mike Evans, or you're going to be DeAndre Hopkins. And Keon Coleman just is not that. He was not that at Florida State. In his final season at Michigan State, he came down with the football frequently. His contested catch rate was over 60 that year, and that's really good. His final season at Florida State, it was 30. And it was 35. Where was it last season in Buffalo? It's 34%. Where is it right now? 34%. That's the type of player that he is. And it's hard. It's not predictive. It's very difficult to be a Mike Evans or a DeAndre Hopkins type contested catch player. And you can't rely on that routinely. So I think for as much as I'm way more of a proponent of, hey, it's on the players, especially at this high level of football. It's not so much on the coaches. You need to have the horses. The coordinators who don't have the horses are usually bad coordinators, and the guys that have all pros everywhere, they're really good coordinators. For as much as I really believe that, that's one of my tenets. The Bills need to make a change at wide receiver, like I started this segment off with, meaning either Keon Coleman sits for a week or two, or because they are reasonably thin at the position, he needs to bump down to the slot where there's more space for him to operate and he can find better mismatches, or he's just not targeted 7 to 10 times a game. Last season, when he got hurt late in the year, yes, this coincided with Amari Cooper into the offense, and Cooper really didn't do much. The Bills' offense took off. It finished I think from week 10 to week 14, when Keon Coleman was out last season, they had the number 1 EPA per play offense in football. And then even when he came back, and he spoke to this, I really couldn't get worked back into the offense because they were yeah, we'll chuck it downfield to you 1 or 2 times a game, or on a scramble drill, great. But we're not going to feature you in the offense. And that needs to happen. They need to scale that back and say, we're not going to feature Keon Coleman. We're going to feature Josh Palmer, who is kind of the par for the course of what I was saying about the Packers, or the same as what I was saying about the Packers, what I just said about the Cardinals, that they haven't had their best man-to-man separator on the field in almost a month now in Josh Palmer. He's going to be back this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now they lose. This coincides with Dalton Kincaid, who's been the most efficient tight end in football as a receiver this season. He hurt his hamstring last week against the Miami Dolphins. But to me, all that says is, okay, it's a bummer for this Bills offense, but it gives more opportunities for the receiver position to show their value. And say, maybe Elijah Moore gets 5 or 6 targets. Maybe Curtis Samuel, kind of like this forgotten free agent signing of a year ago, he's a low 4-3 guy. Maybe he plays on the outside. He's played on the outside before. Elijah Moore has played on the outside at like over 50% of the time in his career. Curtis Samuel has had seasons where he was predominantly an outside receiver. I think we get so caught up in inside, outside with bunch formations, things like that. You don't need to be always on the outside that's right next to the line of scrimmage or to the sideline. And you don't need to be 6'3" to be an outside receiver. I think you can exploit quickness mismatches when you are 5'10", 185 pounds, dealing with a 6'1", 200-pound corner who can maybe get his hands on you because of his length. But if he misses, it's going to be a touchdown. So the Bills need to make a change, shake things up with their wide receiver dynamic. Keon Coleman needs to be the fourth or the fifth option on offense in the passing offense. They need to utilize their backs out of the backfield more and start to feature, again, Josh Palmer, who was playing well before he got injured, and Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel. Miami Dolphins, the team that's coming off their biggest win maybe of the Mike McDaniel era, in terms of they beat a team with a winning record that had owned them the last 5 or 6 years, blew out the Buffalo Bills 30-13 in week 10. The Miami Dolphins run defense is really good. Suddenly, maybe it's Kenneth Grant, maybe it's Jordan Brooks, the linebacker, who's been just always been a great downhill player, even from his days at Texas Tech. He can't cover for a lick, but he's a great run defender and a great blitzer. Over the last 3 weeks, the Miami Dolphins are the number 1 EPA per play on run plays defense in football. If you go back a month, say, hey, maybe you're just kind of cherry picking. Last 4 games from week 6 to week 10, which I think there was maybe a bye week in there for them. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's 5 weeks. They're second in EPA per rush allowed. So this was a team that I said early in the season, like, this might be the worst defense in football, them and the Cowboys. The Cowboys have taken that undesired throne at this point. The Dolphins, their secondary is still really bad. And their pass rush took a hit, losing Jalen Phillips. But in terms of stopping the run, number 1 from week 7 to week 10 in EPA per rush allowed, and number 2 from week 6 to week 10 in EPA per play on runs allowed. So hats off to the Miami Dolphins. I don't want to say for turning things around because they're 3-7, but they have some easier games coming up. And any team can beat any team in any week in the NFL. So I don't want to necessarily suggest that every Cleveland Browns game they're going to lose and the Tennessee Titans are going to go 1-16. I mean, they could, I guess, but it wouldn't shock me if both those teams get some wins down the stretch. But it's not as though the Miami Dolphins have their most difficult games over the next month or so. They could maybe get back into the hunt in the AFC playoff race. And I think their run defense improvement is a big reason why. New York Jets, talk about improvement. I want to focus on one player, Breece Hall. The last 2 weeks, he has averaged 5.53 yards per carry and over 3 yards after contact in these last 2 victories for the New York Jets. 3.94 2 weeks ago and 3.29 this past week in that win over the Browns. He's playing like the player that we all thought was going to be traded at the trade deadline. He's playing like the super explosive, highly prolific runner that he was at Iowa State that ran 4.38, 4.39 coming out of Iowa State just a few years ago. Now, Justin Fields needs to be significantly better. I mean, to win a game where he was like 6 of 11 is not good, but the defense can be pesky. Even without Quinnen Williams, they played pretty well on Sunday. Without Sauce Gardner, it was against the Browns and Dylan Gabriel, who's probably the most hamstrung, limited quarterback in football right now. But it could be a defense that can give some offenses problems, and maybe they just turn to this Breece Hall-centric offense because there was a time not too long ago that Breece Hall was like one of the most young and exciting running backs in football, and he's looked like that guy the last 2 weeks. New England Patriots. I talked about Matthew Stafford earlier, front runner for the MVP. Drake May is definitely in the running in year 2 for NFL MVP. He has been that good. He is one of 2 quarterbacks right now, Drake May, who is in the top 10 in adjusted completion rate. He's 3rd in adjusted completion rate. and also in the top 10 in average depth of target. The only other is Sam Darnold, who to me would be the third candidate for MVP at this point. So Drake May, third in adjusted completion rate. That's completion rate, and you factor out throwaways, times that a quarterback is hit as he's thrown, and spikes, obviously. But those do count as an incomplete pass in the classic completion rate stat. Third in adjusted completion rate, and he's tied for 10th in average depth of target. So this is not Alex Smith. This is not Mac Jones that he's just checking it down. And oh yeah, his adjusted completion rate is third in the NFL. He's chucking it deep. He's throwing the football, I think his I didn't write it in my notes here, but I'm pretty sure it's 9 yards, which is pretty damn high. 10th highest in the NFL. And they are huge favorites on Thursday Night Football here in Week 11, just tonight, like 8 hours from now, 10 hours from now. 13.5-point favorites in the division against the Jets at home. But yes, Drake May has been so good in year 2, looking a lot like the quarterback he was in his second to last season at North Carolina when he had Josh Downs and he had some quality wide receivers and a much more cohesive offensive line in front of him. But he is one of 3, to me, MVP candidates entering Week 11. Okay, jumping to the AFC North. Baltimore Ravens. They've won 2 in a row. Lamar Jackson's back. He was dealing with an injury earlier this week. I think he's going to be fine. But they traded away Odafe Owe well before the trade deadline. And for long-term team building, from a long-term team building perspective, I understood it, that they felt like he hasn't quite done it as a late first rounder in 2021. We're not going to re-sign him, so let's get something for him. That's like the Baltimore Ravens way. But the Ravens are 29th in pressure rate right now. And I've said this for going on a month now, if not longer. They have a pass rush problem. They've normally been the team that's brought in a Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy, who's still there and is probably their best outside pass rusher. Not giving away those players like they did with Odafe Owe, who I was a little down on, but was a serviceable 3-down defensive end. Maybe they're just leaning on and hoping that their second-round pick, Mike Green, turns it on because he's not really been that good this season as a rookie. And I'm not burying him and saying that Mike Green isn't going to be a good player, but Tavius Robinson, Kyle Van Noy, Mike Green, that's your edge rushing group. Now, I think the Ravens can be explosive enough on offense that might not matter a ton, but to climb out of this 2-5 hole that they were in, I think they have to be better as a pass rush. Now, Nnamdi Madubuike is really good. Travis Jones next to him has actually shown some signs as an up-the-field pass rushing nose tackle. He was a really fun player at UConn just a few years ago. But 29th in pressure rate entering Week 11. They're right now, their best pass rusher is Kyle Hamilton. He has transitioned from, he shouldn't be a strong safety. He should be a free safety. And, oh, man, that's what the Baltimore Ravens defense needed this season to go to. The opposite. All right, we got to take you from free safety and move you down closer to the box, and you're going to be like an outside linebacker. And he's been so good as a blitzer. I don't know if they can continue to rely on that because of what him blitzing does to the secondary and how much space it leaves open. But I still think the Ravens, 29th in pressure rate, have a pass rush problem. Cincinnati Bengals. I just want to highlight something that's just, I don't want to say hilarious, but it's just like crazy. Or maybe it's just crazy and hilarious. Since Joe Flacco took over, I think week 6, the Cincinnati Bengals are 5th in EPA per play in the NFL in non-garbage time. So like they are an elite level offense with Joe Flacco at the helm. That speaks to Joe Flacco in his 40s doing what he's doing. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Andre Yoshabaz, the offensive line that is better, and Zach Taylor's offensive scheme. They're also 3rd in EPA per rush since Joe Flacco took over. It hasn't really felt like that watching the Cincinnati Bengals run game with Chase Brown and Samaje Perine since Joe Flacco took over, but the numbers are the numbers. They're third in EPA per rush since week 6. And if you're a Bengals fan still clinging to hope that when Joe Burrow returns, maybe in less than a month, that they can go on a run and be this wildcard team that nobody wants to play, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at, hey, we have to win a couple shootouts like 35-38, 41-38, because the defense is still very, very bad. They don't have Logan Wilson. He wasn't really playing anyway. They're playing 2 rookie linebackers. They don't have a pass rush. DJ Turner's playing well, but beyond that, in the secondary, not a lot of encouraging signs. But they are an elite level offensive team, even with Joe Flacco at quarterback. And I think it speaks to the talent that they have on that side of the ball, especially at receiver. Cleveland Browns. I saw a tweet earlier this week that I want to highlight, that the Cleveland Browns are going to trot out Dylan Gabriel again. And I don't want to totally bash this rookie, but I was not a fan of the pre-draft process, all that. I said it last week that they need to try something else, his arm strength, turnover-worthy plays, too high, all that. But I'm not going to go there. I saw a tweet that it was like seemed so fitting for the Cleveland Browns. And I'm not like laughing at their fan base. I mean, I know how gung-ho and how passionate about football the state of Ohio is and how passionate Browns fans are. But they're going to start Dylan Gabriel this week. And they are going to look around the league and see Joe Flacco starting, who was their starter earlier this season. Jacoby Brissett starting, who started for them like multiple times in Arizona. Jameis Winston, who was their starter for stretches last season. He's going to start for the Giants, and obviously Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. Like, how weird is that as a Cleveland Browns fan? To be like, there are literally 4 other quarterbacks starting games, and one of which, in Baker, is a really, really good quarterback. And Joe Flacco is leading a team that's 5th in EPA per play. How weird is that to see 4 other quarterbacks starting when you're like, nah, yeah, we're starting Dylan Gabriel, who has maybe the weakest arm in the NFL and is the most limited quarterback in football. The defense is great. Carson Schlesinger's been great. Ronnie Hickman's been good. Obviously, Myles Garrett has been awesome. Some of their younger edge rusher and like defensive linemen have been awesome. Mason Graham has been as advertised as a top 5 pick at defensive tackle. And I think if you're thinking to the future for the Browns, which you probably, I'm assuming you are if you're a Browns fan, Carson Schlesinger, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah next season could be a spectacular linebacker tandem. Denzel Ward is still really good. But you're going to watch the rest of the NFL, and there's going to be 4 other quarterbacks starting that were your starters recently, not like 10 years ago. I mean, I guess Baker was now like 3 or 4 years ago. But Jameis, Jacoby Brissett, and Joe Flacco all starting elsewhere. Pittsburgh Steelers. Finally, Nick Herbig has been freed. I've been banging the table, literally going to bang the table here with my fist. He is now up to 54% of the Steelers' defensive snaps entering Week 11. And he has a pressure rate of 14.4%. It's not ridiculously high, but it's close to that magical number that you want at edge rusher of 15%. He has a higher pressure rate than both Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. And I did a TikTok video about this player and this development that Nick Herbig is finally freed. I've been calling for it forever. And made the mention that, okay, of course, he's not seeing double teams at the rate of TJ Watt or even Alex Highsmith. But when Highsmith, Watt, and Nick Herbig are on the field at the same time, that is like a terrifying pass rush group. Because Herbig like aligns in the A gap, in the B gap. Every once in a while, TJ Watt kicks inside or Alex Highsmith can. But Herbig has proven to be such a valuable commodity to this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And it's about time that he's not seeing this field 20 or 30% of the time. Maybe because of Alex Highsmith's injury earlier in the season. That's why his snap count is up to, or snap rate is up to 54%, but that's where it should be. It should be between 50 and 70%. He is that good of a player, and he is so versatile. When you watch Nick Herbig's film, he is winning against guards. He is winning with power against centers. He is winning with speed to power or a spin move against tackles, or just an outside speed rush against tackles, bend. He has got it all. I absolutely love Nick Herbig. My draft algorithm resin loved Nick Herbig. Such a great pick in the 2023 draft by the Steelers. Tennessee Titans, AFC South here. We're going to move to that division. Got 2 more divisions here on the Week 10 edition of All 32. And again, please subscribe. I'm not going to say anything negative about the Tennessee Titans. They have that enough. They've had 1 victory this season. They're coming off a bye week, and hopefully they can turn things around for that organization and their fans. I want to talk about Gunnar Helm, their rookie tight end. If you are clinging to any hope for Cam Ward, okay, he's been all right, especially maybe relative to being in the worst situation of any quarterback in football. But their tight end, Gunnar Helm, has a yards per route run average of 1.48. I guess it's not average, but yards per route run of 1.48. Not ridiculously high. You want to be closer to 2 if you're a tight end, 1.75 if you're a tight end. But that 1.48 for Gunnar Helm is higher than George Kittle, higher than Kyle Pitts, and higher than Mark Andrews. So if you're looking to the future as a Titans fan, you're like, all right, we got Cam Ward. We're obviously not giving up on Cam Ward. And you want to look at, well, how is the rest of the rookie class? Gunnar Helm is one of the pieces from this rookie class, the 2025 draft class for this GM, Mike Borgonzi. And he's actually been pretty efficient. He only has 1 touchdown, but 1.48 yards per route run is damn good for a rookie tight end. Houston Texans. I saw a couple tweets that in this crazy comeback over the Jacksonville Jaguars, which I'll obviously get to next, said, oh, this is the Davis Mills game. It was kind of ugly. Like, I don't know how that happened. I think it was more the Jacksonville Jaguars just blowing that game than Davis Mills playing tremendous football. He showed that he can play in the league, and there's a reason that he's remained a backup and can come in and you don't have to totally truncate the offensive playbook. But he had 3 big time throws, which that's what he showed at Stanford. He has a big arm. He was one of the top recruits in the nation coming out of high school, but also 4 turnover worthy plays. And then the long stretch when he played, when Deshaun Watson, when all that stuff was happening in Houston, he showed oh, wow, he made that really good throw, but under pressure, Davis Mills crumbles. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Not that anyone in the world is suggesting that he should play over CJ Stroud, but don't be surprised if Davis Mills and the passing offense, although he could be another, I was going to say, don't be surprised if he comes back to earth a little bit. Although, fully healthy Nico Collins. And while he was hurt, they started to incorporate Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, the 2 Iowa State rookie wide receivers that they picked. They started to incorporate some of the other pieces of the offense. And now they have the full complement of wide receivers. So it won't be surprising either way, I guess, which is maybe just playing right on the middle of the fence. But it was just in watching the film, and I was one that liked what I saw from Davis Mills in those long auditions when Deshaun Watson was injured and was dealing with all the legal stuff and was suspended, all that. But I went back to watch the film and I was like, oh, there was 4 really bad turnover-worthy plays in this game from Davis Mills. Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm kind of done with Trevor Lawrence. I think he is fully riding the fact that he was the most hyped quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck and was the biggest recruit, I don't know, ever since in the last 15 to 20 years at quarterback. Won the national title as a freshman at 19 years old at Clemson, beat Alabama, and it was oh man, this guy could be in the NFL today. I'm done with him. He's played over, I believe, over 60 games at this point. He's won 1 playoff game, a crazy comeback against the Chargers 3 or 4 years ago. Beyond that, he just doesn't do it for me. And they've invested a lot. Now, I get it. They lost Travis Hunter, but they went back-to-back wide receivers in the first round for him. Brian Thomas Jr. went over 1,200 yards a season ago. He's going to get Brenton Strange back, the very athletic tight end, in maybe this week or maybe next week. They drafted a first-round running back. They've invested in the offensive line. They have a pretty good defense. Trevor Lawrence has 9 big-time throws to 15 turnover-worthy plays this season. he was just horrific against Houston, especially after they built that big lead. Like any competent quarterback and someone that's played as much football from 18 years old until now that Trevor Lawrence has played would find a way to win that game. All right, I'll take a couple easy completions, get a couple first downs, and they're just going to run out of time. Even if they start to mount this ferocious comeback, there's just not enough time for them to ultimately win this game. To lose that last week in the division was crushing. I'm done with Trevor Lawrence. Indianapolis Colts, big win in Germany to get to 8-2 after the loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers in a game that seemed back and forth against the Atlanta Falcons. I want to talk about Sauce Gardner, though. He had a pass breakup in his Colts debut. He didn't look super duper sticky in coverage. There were some times where Drake London got the best of him, even Darnell Mooney. But he had 6 tackles without a missed tackle in his debut. And that is something that this season, even early on with the Jets, has drastically improved for Sauce Gardner. His missed tackle rate is like at 7% right now. And he had been over 10% the last 2 seasons in New York. So even though the coverage has taken a clear step back, on the outside, Sauce Gardner has become someone that's not making business decisions and not saying, hey, I'm just a coverage guy. I don't make tackles. He's actually having a higher volume of tackles. To have 6 tackles in one game is a lot for a corner. And to not have any missed tackles in his debut against a Bijan Robinson and and as part of a new scheme, very, very impressive. All right, the last division on Week 10's All 32 show, AFC West. I'm going to start with the Los Angeles Chargers, and I'm going to continue to track this until something else from this team, another development really pops up. I'm going to be tracking how this team performs and how Justin Herbert is protected after losing Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater together. In Week 10, Justin Herbert was pressured 42.5% of the time. On those pressure dropbacks, he was 5 of 11 for 84 yards. Not great. A few weeks ago, he was pressured like 60-something% of the time and had a tremendous performance against pressure. 2 weeks ago, not quite as good, was pressured over 40%. Third straight week being pressured over 40% of the time. That is not a good sign. It's very scary if you're a LA Chargers fan that feels good about this team's record and the current status of the AFC West with the Chiefs in third right now. But I will say what I think Chargers fans, beyond just having Justin Herbert, who's a freaky talent at quarterback, you're feeling good beyond just the record and having him. The defense has been awesome. The Chargers right now are first in EPA per dropback allowed on defense. They've gotten Khalil Mack back the last 3 or 4 games. He's been great. Tuli Pelotu has been awesome as a stunt guy. He's not going to win one-on-ones a lot, but he understands his role as a blitzer, as a guy that's going to wrap on stunts and get to the quarterback. Derwin James has been awesome. They've just really pieced it together. I think the scheme is very confusing and very good for this Chargers defense. First in EPA per dropback on D. That's something that you want to strive for if you're any defensive coordinator, to efficiently stop the pass. And they're doing that better than any team in the NFL this season. Kansas City Chiefs. All right, the Chiefs are what? They're 6-4. And I wanted to look at their upcoming schedule because it will ultimately, it's going to tell, I mean, it's almost the entire remaining parts of their schedule. But this next 5 games are either going to tell us, are the Chiefs, I don't want to say like, is the window closed? And that whole concept is kind of silly anyway. As long as Patrick Mahomes is there, the window's open. But are they going to be playing on the road and on wildcard weekend? Or are they going to be winning the AFC West for like the 10th straight year? This week, Denver Broncos. Without Patrick Surtain, which certainly helps. Then against the Indianapolis Colts, at Dallas, which the defense is terrible, but they can score points. And they're seemingly a different team in Dallas than they are anywhere else. Then Houston and the Chargers. So their next 6 games, Denver, Indy, Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles Chargers. Or that's next 5 games. They're 6-4. Can they go 3-2 in that stretch? 4-1? Or do they go 1-4? Do they go 2-3? I mean, I guess I'm throwing out every possibility here. But that's a pretty difficult stretch for a team that was playing awesome football, was really healthier, and that's kind of been the overarching theme of this episode. Like, how healthy are you? Who's out for you? Earlier in the season, Xavier Worthy gets hurt on the 3rd play of the year. No Rashee Rice. Oh, man, the offense is struggling. Well, yeah, it's struggling. But they get those guys back, and they were humming until they faced the Bills in Week 9. And Patrick Mahomes had one of his worst games in the NFL in the regular season. But we will see against the Broncos, the Colts, the Cowboys, the Houston Texans, and the LA Chargers. Those are, when you look at Denver, Houston, and in their own division, the Chargers, those are like 3 of the top defenses in football. Houston's really good on defense. They have the best outside pass rushing group in football, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Chargers, like I just said, are first in EPA per dropback allowed. Denver Broncos, really good on defense. So we will see. The next 5 weeks will tell us what we need, everything we need to know about the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't want to end with the Las Vegas Raiders. It's kind of just like a bummer to end with, but it's something very generic about a specific player. They need to incorporate Jack Bech more in the offense. I absolutely adored him, and there's not really anything from the analytics perspective that would say like, hey, look, he's, his yards per route run is over 2 and they're not throwing him the ball. It's not like a Nick Herbig type situation. I just loved him during the pre-draft process. I thought he was very similar to Puka Nacua in that he's like similar sized, didn't test through the roof, but tested good enough. He caught everything at TCU and LSU earlier in his college career, and he was just a monster after the catch. They don't have Jacoby Myers anymore, and it's really Brock Bowers or bust, and we saw last week against the Denver Broncos that they just took Brock Bowers away, and Geno Smith really had no answers. It was like Tyler Lockett and Trey Tucker, which I like both those players, and especially long-term, I like Trey Tucker. Every team should have a Trey Tucker. Small, quick, can separate. But let's start utilizing your 2nd-round pick, Jack Bech, into this offense. If Chip Kelly wants to kind of utilize him as a small tight end, I'm fine with that. And he's used tight ends a lot, from Oregon to in Philadelphia to Ohio State. Use Jack Bech in this offense if you want to start to get things rolling and not have a 2 or 3 win season. And last but not least, certainly not least, the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix, to me, has not really improved a ton this season. I obviously, their record is better than it was last year. And ironically, Bo Nix was really good in that playoff game last season against the Bills. Had a long touchdown to start that game. But there was a lot of momentum I'm kind of getting at going into his 2nd season. I think he's been about the same, if not maybe we've seen a little regression from him. Last year, and I'm going to focus on this game against the Kansas City Chiefs, this huge AFC West matchup for the Broncos. Bo Nix had his highest pressure to sack rate in that game against the Kansas City Chiefs a season ago. It was well over 20%. And he's been one of the most elusive quarterbacks, one of the quarterbacks most difficult to turn a pressure into a sack. And that's a really great attribute for a quarterback to have. A lot of the best quarterbacks in football, most of them are really good at avoiding sacks, even when they're pressured. Week 18 last season was like the Chiefs' backups, so that I'm not counting that game, but his highest pressure to sack rate was a season ago against Kansas City. And this year, to me, 4 of Bo Nix's worst games, and that's pretty subjective, but 4 of his worst games, he held the ball for over 2.8 seconds on average. His time to throw was over 2.8 seconds. The games that have been better for Bo Nix, where he's looked like he's wanting to try to take that step, under 2.8 seconds. And that's right around where it was in that game against Kansas City last year. So Bo Nix wants to be that extension of Sean Payton, get the ball out quickly, accentuate yards after the catch, the screen game, RPOs to Cortland Sutton, get Troy Franklin involved on the RPO game over the middle. If he has to hold the ball a lot and isn't good at avoiding pressure, I think the Kansas City Chiefs could give him a lot of problems in this game. All right, hour and 20 minutes today. Thank you so much for watching. I think I covered all 32 teams on all 32. This was week 10's edition before week 11. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe this video, and definitely do not forget to click the link, the timestamps in the description, not the link. They are links, clickable timestamps. Send this to your friends and your family members and remind them, just go to the description and find the clickable timestamp. I had someone the other week saying, I watched all the show and I was waiting for you to get to my team. You could obviously just fast forward or use those clickable timestamps at the bottom. This was week 10's edition of All 32. I'm Chris Trapasso. Thank you so much for watching.